Order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes, thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve, May 24th, 2010, and June 7th.
Will they be approved?
I have a comment. Hang on one second. It's on page 5. I think they kind of misstated.
Which minutes?
I'm sorry, the May 24th one. I think my point was that where it says did not want to see a request for $600,000 of aggregate. I think my point was that I didn't want to see a request for an increase in the authorized expenditures of $600,000. So I don't know if that's what that was intended to mean. I just didn't feel comfortable with the way it was worded. It's even not a complete sentence in my opinion, although I'm not an English teacher.
I have one change, or perspective change on page
Mike?
9. One perspective change on page 9, under the discussion of declaration by Director of Community Development. That's Commissioner Fisher's opinion on the purpose of the declaration. My opinion is different. My opinion is that the purpose of the declaration would be to protect human health. So I think the record should reflect the difference of opinion that Commissioner Fisher and I had on the declaration.
Move the approval of those changes.
Anything on the June 10th or June 7th? Okay. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We had an executive session tonight, as you all know. Quite lengthy. We were talking about real estate issues, the ongoing litigation, and also some litigation concerning tax settlements, and also some personnel matters relative to the township and the boards. Thank you. We have an update from the Wayne Business Association on the Jazz Festival. Diane?
Good evening. I'm Diane Jorley, President of the Wayne Business Association, and I just wanted to report that our 7th annual Land Rover Mainline Jazz, Food, and Art Festival was a huge success again. Thanks to the key sponsors, Land Rover Mainline, Wayne Jewelers, and Joseph P. Melvin and Company. Thanks also to the efforts of Jen Baylor, Chris Todd, and Laura Munich, who produced the festival with the partnership of the Wayne Business Association, the Township, and the Wayne Art Center. I was on the street pretty much all day, and it was crowded. There was a good, steady crowd, and John was sitting under my tent here. And it was a good, steady crowd through the entire event. So we were very, very pleased, and we just wanted to thank you for your help and support. And we like to think that our Wayne Business Association events showcase our town of Wayne and bring commerce into Radnor throughout the entire year. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. One of the things I found interesting, because I was there fairly early in the day, was the number of people that I didn't know or recognize. So that suggests to me that we had people coming from outside our community, which is a really positive thing for the Wayne businesses. Auditor's report.
Good evening. My name is Mike Palazzo. I'm here from Larson Allen. I am a manager with Larson Allen and served as the managing in charge on your 2009 financial audit. I'm here tonight to give you an update on the financial audit and to also go over a couple highlights for the 2009 audit. First off, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for the opportunity to serve as your auditor. This is actually our second financial audit that we've conducted for the township, and we greatly appreciate the opportunity to work with you for a second year. For 2009, your government-wide net assets had a deficiency of $8.3 million. A significant portion of that was related to the losses in 2009 of $4.7 million. A large portion of that deficit that you incurred in 2009 was directly related to your OPEB obligation. And if you recall from last year, this was a new standard that impacted your 2008 financial statements. This is related to your other post-employment benefit obligations. In 2008, the new standard required that you report this liability on your financial statements. So in 2008, we added $3.2 million of liability to your financial statements. That liability has increased by another $3 million this year. So at the end of 2009, you have a total OPEB obligation of $6.2 million. So when you're looking at that $4.7 million loss in your change in net assets, $3 million of that is directly related to this OPEB obligation. At the end of the year, your general fund undesignated fund balance was $3.4 million. That's a decrease from $6.5 million in 2008. So you're looking at a slightly more than $3 million loss in your general fund for 2009. That represents about a 15% of your general fund expenditures, or approximately 1 3/4 months of expenses. That percentage is down from the prior year. It was closer to about 30%. So you are seeing some decreases in your general fund balance from 2008. This is pretty representative of what we've seen with other townships and other municipalities in the area, certainly as the economy has had a significant impact on your bottom line.
How about on the net assets deficiency? Is that comparable to others, or not?
It's a little bit higher, and a lot of that, again, is directly related to your
Our
OPEB.
deficiency is higher than comparable deficiencies, or we're in a better position?
Your deficiency is a little bit higher than what we've seen. Again, a lot of that is your OPEB. Your OPEB is a little bit higher than what we normally see in other municipalities. A lot of that is based on contracts that were set up many years ago and how those are being paid out according to the liability. So that is a little bit higher than what we've seen in other local municipalities. The audit approach for 2009 was a risk-based audit approach. Really what that means is rather than doing an approach where we're looking at a little bit of everything, we focus our audit specifically towards high-risk areas. To determine what is high risk, we look at a lot of different things, from your internal controls to what we've seen in prior audits, our experience with other municipalities. The big part of our audit approach, though, is communication. We talk to everybody within the township throughout the audit process from beginning to end, whether that's meeting with the commissioners, meeting with management, other individuals in the townships. We conduct a lot of interviews and discussions. And then from that, we're able to determine what we deem as high risk, and we really concentrate and focus our audit in those areas. The results for the 2009 audit, we are issuing an unqualified opinion, which is good news for the township. That's the highest level opinion we can give. That essentially means that the financial statements are considered free from material misstatements. It's also what is generally referred to as a clean opinion. So that is good news for the township. I will emphasize that at this point, the financial statements and all letters are still in draft form. We actually met with management today to review the draft. They've had a copy of it for about a week. Those will stay in draft until management approves and the commissioners approve the draft, at which point we'll then finalize it. So it is still in draft form. There's still opportunity for the commissioners and management to take a look and get back to us with any questions that they have. The next couple slides highlight some key audit findings for 2009. The one thing I want to emphasize with this is a lot of the findings that we have listed here were also identified in our 2008 report. The reason for that is because we completed our report in February of 2010. So obviously any recommendations we would make for changing controls wouldn't happen until 2010. So therefore, a lot of the comments are repeating for 2009. We have presented these findings in a management letter. Management has reviewed the letter. They've responded to our comments, so they're definitely aware of these recommendations. Some of the findings we had, just disbursement approval process. In the past, the commissioners would review checks after they were cut. We were recommending that they have the opportunity to review checks before they're cut. We have some recommendations on improving payroll approval process. One of the big areas that we're looking to see is an updated accounting policies and procedural manual. And in fact, a lot of the comments you'll see in the next couple of slides would all get pushed into your new accounting policy manual.
So Bob, based on that, when would you think a new accounting policy manual would be finished?
Our hope would be by the end of the year that we could do that.
So, when you review 2010, you would still find a deficiency on that matter for 2010 because while it was done, it wasn't implemented in 2010?
What we would do is update our letter to say that there was no policy in place for 2010, but a policy was adopted, let's say December 2010. So we'll create a letter that includes.
I just want to
any
understand.
updates. Yes.
Okay.
Some additional comments for 2009, adoption of an expense allocation plan, an updated whistleblower policy, conflict of interest policy, which would be applied to all key employees, and also include a vendor list that's reviewed by the Treasurer and the Board of Commissioners. We're recommending an audit committee be formed. We're also recommending some changes in credit cards and expense reimbursements, which actually has already taken place in 2010. Recommendation for a formal purchase order system, which would include a purchase order log and removal of blanket purchase order approvals. A documented disaster recovery plan, and we're recommending that criminal and credit background checks be completed for all accounting, IT personnel, and consultants. And as I said, these recommendations have been presented to management in a draft form, and they have provided us with responses.
I just want to comment that the manager has agreed to provide a schedule of these recommendations with projected due dates and completion dates, so the board will be kept up to date as to when and when they expect to complete these, and also when they're completed.
Just to add to that, just as the discussion that came out this morning, is to provide the board with a bullet point list of all the deficiencies that the auditors have found, and then come up with an action plan that have looked to resolve these issues at the timeline that Commissioner Fisher just spoke about.
One item that I do want to discuss with the commissioners is, and just to take a few minutes, is to go over a new accounting standard that's going to have a significant impact on not only 2011, but how you're looking at your budget process in 2010. This new standard is GASB 54, and what GASB 54 is doing is it's creating new definitions on your fund balances and the different types of buckets that your fund balance falls into. A lot of these categories currently exist, but they're being redefined and given new titles and giving a lot more direction on how these fund balances should be segregated on your financial statements. Again, it doesn't impact your township financial statements until 2011, but as you're going through the budget process now, it's important that you have an understanding of the standard.
Can you give an or maybe you're about to do that. Is this your examples and things?
Yes, I'm just going to go through, just give you a broad overview of what these new categories are, and as you'll see, there are 5 new categories. The first one is called non-spendable fund balance. This would include any funds that cannot be spent due to form. So that would include things like inventories and prepaid amounts. You actually, if you look at your 2009 financial statement, you'd see a similar line that breaks out those amounts. So it's not a significant change other than how we're defining that category. Restricted fund balance would include any amounts that are restricted by an outside source. A good example of that would be a grant that you've received for a specific purpose that you can't spend for any other purpose. that would have, if it's unspent at the end of the year, it would have to be included in this restricted fund balance category. Committed fund balance is really one of the newer categories. This is also the one that impacts the commissioners the most. These are funds that are constrained for a specific purpose by the commissioners, making a required action to constrain these resources. So this would be the commissioners passing a resolution to set funds aside and commit those funds for a specific purpose. So this is one of the bigger ones, and one of the ones that's going to impact 2011 and your 2010 as you're putting your budget together. And it's also important to know that you don't have to define specific amounts. It's really just giving being able to put a certain amount aside, but not necessarily a specific amount. It allows management the opportunity to define those amounts, because they may not be specifically cleared at the time you pass the resolution. The next category is assigned fund balance. This is kind of a catch-all for your special revenue funds. If anything doesn't fall into the previous categories for your special revenue funds, it would be called an assigned fund balance. And then the last category is kind of self-explanatory. It's an unassigned fund balance. So this would be anything in your general fund that doesn't meet any of the other categories. Whatever's kind of left over will fall into this unassigned category. Are there any questions on the?
I have a question for Bob more than anybody else. So how are you going to operationalize that through the budget process? Will you show 2011 compared to 2010 in the old method, and then kind of show us 2011 in parallel, old and new, or would you kind of try to get 2010 sort of fit into this so that we're looking at, as best we can, apples and apples versus apples and oranges? Or have you not really?
There's a lot that would go into that, but I think that would be one of the tasks with the new finance director coming on board on July 8th to be able to put together a parallel of more than likely of 2011 and not trying to tie that back to 2010, which may be difficult to try to draw those two comparisons together. But I think moving forward for 2011 of the commitment moving forward would want to align itself.
And one of the things we talked to Bob about was, as he gets involved in that process, to reach out to us with any questions. It's a learning process we're all going to be going through with this new standard. So, certainly we're going to be available to answer some questions to make sure that the policies that you're setting in place are meeting the standard and the requirements under the standards.
I have a quick question about one of the recommendations in the disbursement approval process in the material weaknesses section. It looks, I read it that you suggest that we have a rotating board member who looks at backup invoices that go along with so that someone is looking at the backup invoices, not just the disbursements. And then I read our response as saying, well, anybody can anytime. Mm-hmm. So my question is, does that satisfy that need? If any of us could at any time, if we don't actually have a system set up that somebody actually is assigned to do it every pay period or whatnot?
Yeah, I think as long as the opportunity is there, certainly it would be even better if somebody was checking that and you made that part of your procedures. Certainly is better than nobody looking at it all, but just having the opportunity. As long as that opportunity is there, we're comfortable with it. But
Isn't the treasurer performing that function for us? That independent review?
Yes, yeah, that's why we included the treasurer. He would be looking at it, but then the board would also have that opportunity
Okay.
too.
And is Commissioner Schaefer identifying something that was in the 2008 audit and not the 2009? That's my understanding, that recommendation was not in the 2009 audit. Perhaps I'm wrong, but I specifically asked that today, and I couldn't find it in the audit.
No, I believe it's in the 2009.
It's in there.
It's in the 2009 also?
Mhm. It's in the 2008 as well,
Yeah.
Yes.
but it's in the 2009, yeah. Also, on the copy that I was sent on I got a soft copy on the computer, none of the IT management responses were entered yet. Have we received those?
Yes, we
Okay.
have. Yes.
Okay, and I guess we'll get those when they,
Yes, we'll send out
Okay.
another draft. I actually got them today.
Okay.
We got it. So we'll send out another draft.
I also noted that, I don't have the correct page numbers because mine was paginated weird, but the section in your notes that talks about some of our outstanding obligations and whatnot, it talks about the Bay Shore home loan, and it does not reflect that has been settled. I don't know
Actually,
if
that
you-
We
was-
discussed that this morning.
Oh, you
It's going to
did?
be revised.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So we've revised that, and we've also added the IT
Okay.
additional responses per our
Okay.
discussions this morning. So we'll make sure we send out another draft.
That's great.
tomorrow.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. Again, we appreciate the opportunity. My contact information is here, as well as Bruce Brunwell, who serves as the principal. So if there's any questions, please feel free to contact us.
Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the public this morning, John Fisher, myself, and Don Curley met with Bruce and Mike and Township staff and did a very detailed review of the entire report. I think my eyes were bleeding by the time we got done, but it was thorough, and a lot of the questions that came up tonight were asked at that time. Departmental reports.
Move to be accepted.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions,
One
comments?
question. On page 2, it says, John Fisher, Bob Thomas, and I met with PennDOT, PA DOT regarding the concept of extending the Radnor Trail to Ithan Village in late fall.
What report are you talking about?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the
Park
Parks and
Parks and
Recs.
Rec.
Okay.
And that in late fall has to be some kind of mistake, right? It's written in the past tense as saying that we had the meeting, implying there's plans to extend the trail to Ithan Village in late fall. Is that accurate?
No, the plan is not to extend the trail in late fall. You had the meeting in the
That's when
late
the
fall.
Right, so the in late fall just isn't accurate. Oh, okay, very good.
Okay, we'll get that back to Tom.
I
Any
wanted
other-
to just note that in the community development report, the building permits are pretty significant this month, and the income from them are it's very significant, which is good news. So whenever there's good news, we like to call it out. But the building permit income for this report is close to $200,000 for the month. So, hooray.
Hopefully you didn't put a jinx on it. Okay, we have a motion moved and seconded. No further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So passed. Committee reports, community development. Commissioner Curley.
The first item is HARB 2010-24, Certificate of Appropriateness for 200.5 West Wayne Avenue to demolish a 5-car garage. Mr. Baumann, will you just summarize this for us?
Yes, the HARB meeting, which I attended in May, it was approved unanimously for 2.5 West Wayne Avenue to demolish the 5-car garage. So I recommend this approval.
Very well, I move the approval of HARB 2010-24.
Moved and seconded. Questions from the board? Any public comments? All in favor?
Aye.
I am going to abstain since the Spengler Agency represents this property. It's on the market, and the Spengler Agency represents this property, so I abstain.
The second item is appointment to Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee. I move that we appoint Susan Byrne.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm going to abstain because Ms. Byrne is my sister-in-law.
And Commissioner Nagel, did you want to have a discussion from someone from Implementation Committee?
Yes,
Is that now or later?
we can do it at the end of the regular business for this section. Or is it at the end of the regular? Okay, come on up, Susan.
Hello, Susan Stern. I am working on the Zoning Ordinance Review Subcommittee, which Steve Palantonio came last month and gave you a brief update of our committee. It's 4 members of the Planning Commission, 4 members of the Implementation Committee from the Comprehensive Plan. And we started last month, pardon me, we had a meeting, which I was not able to attend, where we kind of got underway and said, okay, we're going to start to review ordinances. What's our goals? What's going to be our structure? And although I wasn't able to be at that meeting, you know, the idea is that the Implementation Committee would identify ordinances, kind of prioritize them. First one is plan institution. So we met a few weeks ago as a subcommittee and went through the ordinance really just once. I mean, it took hours to fully go through the ordinance one time. And so I'm here tonight to let you know that we've done that. And as a group, what we had decided is that once we went through it once and got our hands around it, that we would like to have a committee meeting and have the public come in and be with us. We really want it to be a collaborative effort. We want to hear what various, concerns, and different people in the township will have different thoughts about that. So our meeting will be next Wednesday, June 30th. It's at 7:30 p.m., and it is downstairs in the roll call room. And the reason for that is we really do want it to be a collaborative effort, and we expect a fairly large crowd. And this room, the setup of it doesn't really present itself well for us to be a working committee and sit down and hear people's comments. So speaking with Peggy Hagan, she identified with me that the roll call room is really the best room for us to do. It doesn't place a burden on anybody in the township in terms of resources. And it's at 7:30 because they have roll call at 7. So,
Susan, do you have a working draft of the proposed PI changes?
It's a funny word. People keep calling it a draft. I call it a work in progress. And really the reason for that is we've all given our thoughts, comments, talked about it, but the public hasn't sat down with us yet. And until we have that, I kind of say it's not really ready for prime time. There is a document out there that we're going to put on the website. I don't know who does that, but somebody here will do that for us. Jim Greenfield, who's working on the committee, is finishing putting together we had a meeting that extended a long time. So he's kind of putting together the rest of our thoughts and comments as we finished it up. And that will be on the website. My understanding is the intention is to have it on there by Wednesday so that people have a week to digest what's there. And then once the public comes in, and I think they'll have lots to say. I expect them to have lots to say. And, we'll go from that meeting. Our group discussed having a second meeting where maybe in the morning so that people who couldn't come out at night wanted to have an opportunity to come during the day. It's difficult to identify a date as we go through the summer. And so I think that what will happen after that June 30th meeting is we'll try to identify a second date, again, so people can come in and give us their thoughts, comments, work with us.
Do you have a target date for bringing a proposed ordinance to the board for consideration?
I don't have a target date. I think that I think we're sensitive to the fact that it's the summertime, and that it's unrealistic to think, you know what, actually, let me back up. Planning Commission meets you don't meet again until mid-July. So the soonest we would even be able to bring it back to you to even consider, are you ready to have it go to the Planning Commission, would be mid-July, right? And I'm not positive that we'll have had that second meeting by then. So I don't know. I don't know about this.
I know from being the commissioner in the first ward that there are some proposals being touted about with regard to some of the institutions up there. So I think that the people in the first ward would very much like to see a draft coming forward to the Board of Commissioners after it's been vetted in a public meeting so that we can move on that as quickly as possible. So if you keep that in mind as you progress, I would appreciate it.
Meaning you want us to fast track it or make sure that it's got public vetting?
I'm not saying fast track.
Okay.
I'm saying don't let a lot of time slip by without attending to it and getting a draft to us at your
Oh, right.
earliest convenience.
No, right, no, that was, that was a big conversation, is we wanted to get it out there in the public as soon as physically and feasible, get a date, have the public out there. We want to have the feeling, we want the public to have the feeling that they really are fully part of the process. And so, from the June 30th meeting, even over the next week, we'll probably discuss as a committee, listen, let's get that second date out there and figure out what's going to work, what's going to be workable for the township building, resources here, and get the working piece that we have right now up on the website for people to see.
And for those people who are not around, it's summer, people are in and out, but they'd like to react to what they see on the website or provide their own ideas, is there a contact person or an email that they can send their ideas or their reactions to in that group? I mean, is there like a...
Why don't we have Melissa set up an email box for them like we did for CBFAC?
That way you can get input from residents who, are looking at it down the shore.
Sure. Actually, John, that would be a great idea, because I hesitate to give out some person in particular's email and have them then have to take on the burden of disseminating the information. And we really do view it as a collaborative process, the 8 of us. I'm up here tonight, Steve was there last month. It's not a hierarchy kind of a thing. We're just going to all work together to bring forth something that we feel would be good to vet. And then it all starts over again it all starts over in the public process at Planning Commission anyway. So anyway, that's the update. June 30th, 7:30, the roll call room. We really do want the public to come out. John, you're going to work on getting that. We'll get this loaded up
Bob
onto the
nodded,
website.
yes. Yeah, Bob.
So if we could also if we can just identify an email address, and behind the scenes we can figure out where it will get channeled, but that would be great. So that's our update. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Finance and audit.
Excuse me, before you get to
Oh,
that,
yeah.
John, one item that's not on the agenda for community development, but I think it's probably the appropriate place to mention this. Anybody who's been around the township for any length of time knows the dedication that John Simon has given to the township, and particularly community development. He's been on Planning Commission, worked with the comprehensive plan, with the implementation committee, was obviously instrumental in the Wayne Business Overlay District, and I've heard that John is leaving the township, and I just wanted to acknowledge his contribution to Radnor Township and the comprehensive plan, many, many hours working with the Planning Commission, and I just want to wish John and his family well as he moves on to the next phase of his life. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Hank. Commissioner Higgins.
The first item on the agenda is the schedule of bills payable.
Okay,
And-
Bob, do you want to give us the update?
Okay, I have a couple of questions first, Bob. It's identified
Okay.
as 10-6A on the document. The agenda says 10-6. Since it's the only item and we only have one meeting this month, I suspect it's 10-6 appropriately, but I wasn't sure.
There are 2 items on the
So it's-
items under the disbursements for approval report.
So the agenda says we're approving schedule of bills payable 10-6.
Should be 10-6A.
Okay, that's what.
But also in accordance, I'd like to ask that 2 items be removed from the disbursement for approval report. The first one will be on page 11, fleet parts. And the second one is page 13, 85 sports, for further review. So we'd ask that those 2 be removed from the schedule.
Would you say the two
Page
items
11,
again?
fleet parts, and page 13, 85 sports.
Do you have a revised total by any chance?
in regards to the,
Well, it says here the grand total authorized for disbursements is 2,747,621.58. Did you happen to do the math?
no, it's just the removal of those two particular
All
items,
right, but they're 244,
which we will adjust those accordingly.
okay. I guess I have sort of one sort of process question and comment, Bob. In this month, we've attached, and while I like the information, I'm not 100% positive it should be part of this document. I'd just like to get your opinion on that, which is this summary attachment on the general fund. But I appreciate getting it, but should it really be part of the document we approve as part of the disbursements?
I think as part of that, some of the questions that have been raised in regards to the ability to approve these, having the funds available, I think that's what the intention was, is to put that report showing that, these can be paid, that there are the dollars. This will be a work in progress as we get into a monthly reporting to the Board of Commissioners too, to give a accurate reflection of the budget as to trial balances year-to-date and month-to-date. But that's something that as soon as we continue the process and progress on looking at all these different funds, that will be a more detailed report that you'll be receiving as well.
Yep. I appreciate being included. I'm just not sure it's when we're authorizing disbursements that, I would think, because it's attached to the official document, that there's an endorsement of this. I don't know, John Rice, your thoughts?
Isn't this just a supporting attachment?
Well, it's not. It's attached to the document. It's referenced on the page.
Yeah, but it says Exhibit A.
Yeah, no, it says it attaches an updated summary, and it's attached to the whole document, so that's what's got me a little bit.
I don't see any issue with it, Kevin. You've got a bills list, and this is the ongoing supporting document that shows where the funds are.
Okay.
I'm not sure what your concern is
Again,
as
it's
part
what-
of this, but it explains on the front sheet,
I know what it explains.
you know, what's there.
I'm not wed to it. It just makes me a little bit uncomfortable that it's part of what we're approving. So just think about that for the future. And then I have a couple of questions to make sure I understand it accurately. What is identified as 2010 actual and 2009 actual, Allison or Bob, is actual for May year-to-date, correct? So we're finally getting our year-to-date versus year-to-date, but we're not yet at the point where we can get the budget by essentially year-to-date month. Is that accurate? Yes. Okay. So if I understand it, if I take out the change in the real estate tax, because you changed sort of how you were directing it historically, so that's not sort of an apples-to-apples comparison. The business privilege tax is year-to-date, somewhere in the neighborhood about $750,000 ahead. Everything other than the real estate tax is about $150,000 down. I guess I can't tell if you're nodding your head, Allison, so. I can't read with my glasses on, so
Okay,
that's the dilemma I face.
Yes, the business privilege taxes are ahead year-to-date.
Okay.
It is hard to make an apples-to-apples comparison on the real estate tax because of the issue with the debt service tax and the way it was handled in '09 versus the way it's being handled in '10. And you also had a real estate tax increase, so that number is automatically higher, but actually the percentage of the collections is slightly ahead year-to-date. It's hard to see that in the numbers.
Okay. Then, and maybe I'm asking an unfair, premature question, but maybe it's because it's still a work in progress. In the document that you gave us as a projected 2010 item, some of the trends that we're seeing actual to actual don't seem to be carrying through for the full year. Do we have a timing issue in your opinion as to, simply?
Yes, because
Okay.
some of your revenues come in very heavily. For example, your real estate taxes, your business privilege taxes, the majority of that revenue comes in through May. And what you're going to get in the remainder of the year is going to be dramatically less. It's not like you can apply it evenly over the months.
Okay.
So you have to look carefully at each of the revenues and how they're received. And the projections that we've made going out over the remainder of the year is based on an analysis of the historical perspective with heavy emphasis on what's happened since the economic downturn.
Okay.
Let me just ask, are we discussing tonight the projected 2010 general expenses and revenues?
That won't be for the meeting, that's a work in progress,
I'm
too.
just trying
No,
to
this is just
understand what
the-
I'm seeing.
Okay.
Schedule of bills payable.
Right.
I think in the future, as Allison and the finance department staff and the department heads have been doing a nice job putting this together, looking at the general fund, but then also starting to look at all funds. So again, that report will be forthcoming.
Okay.
So that conversation is to be had, still to be had.
So I'm
But
being.
we are making progress in that particular area.
So am I being unfair and premature in asking some of these questions and taking the two documents and looking at them together, and you'd rather I defer that till next month?
That could be a good suggestion.
I'm okay with that. You could just tell me that. You don't have, you
But let
can
me
be
just-
direct with me. I don't
Let
need
me
subtlety.
interject here that the commissioners received a work in progress, a 2010, where we are now and kind of looking at history and where we are now, where we stand. It's incredibly helpful, and it's very well done. The report that we've been given, the budget we've been given, has more detail in the line items than we've ever seen before. I'm not sure when this will be public. I'm not sure if it's on the website now or if it's back. It may be back on the table. I don't even know. But I can tell you from when I was sitting in those seats, it's so frustrating not to know what the board is seeing and talking about. And I'm really looking forward to talking this through and to having our public see this, because it is so well done. And it includes these updated projections that, kind of give us a better snapshot of where we are with detail and broken out in line items. So when I went through this, I did have some questions. They certainly can wait until we have a better understanding and we have the other funds as well. And when the public is holding the same document, I'm thrilled to have this document. It's, we're finally getting some closure, but I also want to note that we're now moving into July, so that, having this kind of understanding of where we are in this snapshot in July, any changes we're going to make, reacting to this, we don't have that much time. So basically, I guess I'm saying the sooner the better. And I encourage us to get, if it's not out there now, to get it up on the website so that everyone can kind of see it and get used to these new numbers before our next meeting.
I'll also note that it's important that we receive this on June 16th. That's months ahead of when we normally get this type of analysis. Normally, we're looking at this much later, usually in the fall, when we're starting to look at the budget. But we need to know this stuff sooner. So staff has done a great job working on this. Thank you.
I think just to echo those comments, Bob, you've been here how many days now? 60?
This is actually the seventh week.
Okay. So we got what we wanted 7 weeks after he got here. So I think, it's a sign of good progress.
But also, I think Allison gets a big part of the credit here, a huge part in the finance department staff. But also, I think there's a consensus that not only that conversation that I think all of you have been talking about, but also beginning the process of the 2011 budget conversations in August of this year, because there will be a lot of connections between 10 and 11. That is the time to start having that conversation as well. So if there are adjustments need to be made, how we finish the year, it's better to make have those conversations in August and September instead of November and December having to make those quick reactions.
Thank you, Allison. I don't have any other comments, so I'll move that this be introduced and the grand total authorized for disbursements of approximately $2.750,000 less the two items off. Be approved, and again, it has the usual notation. These bills have been approved by the respective department head, verified and processed by the finance department, and within the 2010 budgetary limits.
I have the numbers 2.7468378. I did. $784 off. If
Thank
that's
you,
right.
John. Bill says he got the same thing. Great. Okay, we motion made and seconded. Any further questions? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item, Ken.
The next item on the agenda is the authorization for Larson Allen to complete the DCNR grant audit closeout report. I don't know who's going to give us a quick, Bill is, quick
Sure.
explanation.
As you know, we received a $100,000 grant for the D'Antonio Park. I believe we received the funding in 2008. Part of that requirement to do the closeout is a completed audit report by an independent auditing firm, and we're asking your authorization to have Larson Allen complete that on our behalf. It's estimated the cost will be $5,000. That is required as part of the DCNR grant to have a certified CPA firm complete the audit closeout for us.
Does that money, the funding come out of the grant?
No, it's not part of the grant.
Okay.
Is that unusual to have that requirement?
Anything over 100,000 from DCNR.
Or anything over
Yes.
100,000?
100,000 or
Right.
over requires that.
Move the approval of the authorization.
Motion made and seconded. Any further
Yeah.
questions, discussion?
Can the fee just be a flat fee? Why do we, this would seem fairly straightforward, so why couldn't it just be the fee will be 5,000 instead of approximate 5,000?
It depends how much, if there's documents they need additional, it should be no more than 5,000. If you want to change that language, they said between 4,500 to 5,000. All depends how many hours they spend on it and if the documents are available.
Well, I think that's a good change to make.
Yeah, you can put in, we can change it to
Agree or
number not to
disagree with
exceed.
I'll second that.
So,
Further discussion?
Move to approve as amended?
So we're going to make the change on page 5 that says the fee for the engagement should not exceed $5,000.
that's correct.
Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Library. Elaine, you gonna take this, or Kevin?
Well, I'm a little perplexed. So maybe Elaine should, because I don't understand why the item is under.
Well, there are a few things we got an email with a couple of, oh, Steve's here. Do you want to give the report?
Thanks for dressing for us, Steve.
Thank you and good evening.
You look better than the chairman, so.
Thank you.
He's got nicer legs.
My name's Steve Palantonio, President of the Board of Trustees for the Radnor Library, and what I wanted to do is just make a quick announcement for an upcoming event this July. Billie Jean King and Jeff Harrison are co-owners of the Philadelphia Freedoms of the World Tennis League, and they've graciously provided a booth for the library and the Friends of the Library at two of their matches on July 12th and July 15th. The July 12th event, Billie Jean King will be there, and it's themed Children's Education Night, so it's a perfect night for the library and for Billie Jean King and to, get some support for that. The next night is the 15th, which is Andy Roddick night, and that should be a big crowd with his presence there. They also donated 200 tickets to the library, which they're going to pass out to the first 100 kids that sign up for the summer reading program, give them more incentive to hopefully get some kids out and promote reading and away from texting and video games and so forth. What the library and the Friends are going to do at the events is have a free raffle, which if you present your library card, or if you sign up for a library card or sign up for Join a Friend, you can enter the raffle. And there'll be a donation box as well. But what we're doing is keeping the theme of sports, keeping the theme of reading. So we're having local people sign books that we're going to raffle off. Billie Jean King has a book. Phil Martelli, Michael Barkan, and some of the flyers are often at Sal Palantonio has 2 books coming in. And also Craig Snyder is a former North Wayne resident. His dad is Ed Snyder's, and they promised to donate some good stuff from the Flyers organization. We also have a very large poster with Cole Hamels. It's him reading a book with the title Read, and that's in the process now of getting signed as well. And we're also going to present to Billie Jean King a large honorary library card. She's welcome anytime that she's ever in Wayne. But what we're trying to do is promote awareness of the library and friends of the library and the importance of reading, especially with kids. Hopefully with some of the sports figures, it gives them more incentive to read. And outside of our normal venue of book sales and so forth, it's a different place to see the library in action, and that's what I just wanted to say tonight, because I think the next meeting would be after that event. So I just wanted to announce that to the public, and thank you very much.
Thanks.
Can I just add 2 quick things that Kathy, you don't have to respond to these, that Kathy emailed me about for announcements. One was that there was a small fire in the library. If you noticed it, the library had been closed for 24 hours. There was a small fire in the HVAC system. It was taken care of, but it did cause some damage, and there are claims being made against from PICO and from the insurer. Secondly, the Summer Reading Club is up and running. It began on June 18th. And it's a great way for kids to come in and keep their reading skills, so please get online and sign up. Thirdly, the library received a grant from the the Pennsylvania Humanities Council for a 9-series book discussions about the biography of a marriage, and that series is going to start in the fall, and information will be about it on their website. I presume that's for adults and not children. And then finally, the Friends of the Library had their big book sale in the beginning of June. Their proceeds were down 10% from usual, but they had 67 new individuals sign up as friends.
Thank you, Elaine. Next is Personnel and Administration. Hank? No? John?
It's okay. I've
The
been
other
called
Hank.
worse.
The other Hank.
First up is the announcement of vacancy on the Citizens Communication Council. Please send your resume and letter of interest to Township Manager Bob Zinkowski at 301 Ivan Avenue, Wayne, Pennsylvania. Next on the agenda, we have a motion. We need a motion to authorize staff to place the correct adopted budget in the record. This issue was brought up to us at the last meeting. Apparently, the board had voted on a budget. However, there were several drafts floating around, and somehow the wrong draft was set into the record in the secretary's vault, I guess, so to speak. So I move to authorize staff to place the correct adopted budget into the record.
Second.
I'm just a little confused. I thought that we had discovered that indeed it was the right budget. No?
Yes, you adopted the correct budget. However, there was a different version floating around that went into the minute book.
Oh, okay.
And really, we just, after discussion with the solicitor, we're asking for your motion to correct the minute book.
But the one that was adopted in public
Correct.
is still the one that
there was no issue
rules the
with
day?
Yeah.
Okay.
The paper copy ended up in the minute book. The wrong paper copy.
Motion made and second. Any further questions or comments from the board? Any public comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No further report.
Thank you. Next is Parks and Recreation. The first item is a resolution 2010-22 dealing with Route 100 trail extension, and we have some guests here to tell us about this.
Sure. You know why I'm doing that. Good evening. We have tonight for your consideration, the other John Fisher. I'm wearing several hats, but I'll say Friends of the Radnor Trails, with the primary hat I'm wearing tonight. We have for your consideration tonight a very concise, straightforward, but we believe a very important resolution. As I think most of you know, the right-of-way for the Route 100 trolley line is wide enough to support 4 tracks. However, SEPTA only constructed 2 tracks in the northern half of the right-of-way. This resolution, which we're asking you to adopt tonight, authorizes the township manager or his designee to begin preliminary discussions with all interested parties, which would include SEPTA as the owner of the right-of-way, Haverford Township, Upper Darby Township, Delaware County, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, probably the federal government in terms of potential funding sources, to determine the feasibility of constructing a multi-use macadam trail in the southern half of this right-of-way. The resolution does not authorize the township manager to spend any money. It does not authorize him to enter into any agreements without, in both cases, coming back to the commissioners for your approval. The resolution is important, however, for this reason. If this trail is feasible, it will take years to build. It will involve input from countless interest groups. It will cost millions of dollars. But we need to start the process somewhere. And it is, in my opinion, appropriate to start the process tonight here in Radnor Township. So we are asking you to adopt a resolution which indicates your support of performing the feasibility work that is really necessary before we can determine whether it is at all possible to build this trail. For example, no one has talked to SEPTA. SEPTA owns the right-of-way. We have no idea how SEPTA is going to respond to this. We think it is logical to start this process in Radnor Township. First, because I like to think that Radnor Township is on the cutting edge of new and exciting projects. And second, because Radnor Township would be the western terminus of this trail, and Radnor is home to the only 2 miles of the trail that have been paved at this point and are in use. So what we would like you to do tonight, if you would pass this resolution, we can then move on to the next step in what is going to be a lengthy process. Bob Thomas is here tonight. I think all of you know Bob Thomas. His firm, Campbell Thomas Architects, did the feasibility study for the Garrett Hill project, and Bob is really the trail guru for probably the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I think if a major trail has been built, Bob has been involved in it. And Bob's going to focus on whatever questions you have, but in addition to that, 2 specific issues. First, how will this trail, if it's built, connect to other trails in the greater Philadelphia Trail Network? And that's the subject of the map that Bob just gave you. And second, if you do adopt this resolution tonight, what is involved in this preliminary due diligence phase? So Bob, I will turn over the microphone over to you.
Thank you, John. I think what's really important is to realize how one of the things that's good about this project is how few property owners we would have to work with. On your map, obviously, the Radnor Trail, we have some more PennDOT right-of-way, we have the SEPTA right-of-way, and then we get into Fairmount Park at Carracung Park, and all of that, much of that has already been built. The Cobb's Creek Trail was done about 10 years ago. There are other parts that used to exist that would be restored, and the Clean Air Council has already prepared a study on how to link Cobb's Creek to John Heinz. And 60% of that is already in public ownership. Some of it is park. The other thing that's really important is right now, the Pennsylvania Environmental Council has taken the lead, and they are designing, they will be building with the Tiger Grant, the Transportation Initiative to Generate Economic Recovery funds that came in $23 million into the Philadelphia area, to link the Cobb's Creek Trail with Bartram's Garden, and that is where the Schuylkill River Trail is now under construction to Center City. That's underway as we speak. What this means is that not only would you have a trail going from Radnor on the eastern arc of Delaware County down to Tinicum, where it forms part of the East Coast Greenway, but you'd also have an off-road route all the way to the Schuylkill River at Bartram's and the Schuylkill River Trail taking you right up into downtown Philadelphia. And for every community starting out at Chester County, right at the boundary, at Stratford and going all the way in, this would give you an arm of trail going right into Fairmount Park, Center City, Philadelphia. What's nice is a lot of these are projects that are underway. This whole idea of a Radnor-Tinicum alliance is simply putting together much of the work that has already been done or is being done, so that by linking it together, all the projects, of course, are stronger than being 2 miles here, a mile and a half there, as opposed to 18 miles that are continuous. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
But maybe I just don't grasp the logic, and I don't really have a big issue with it, but what does widening the Radnor Trail have to do with connecting?
Widening it?
Is that what this is saying?
No, lengthening it.
Kevin, I think the confusion may be that the Route 100 right-of-way is wide, but they're only using part of it.
That's what I'm just maybe confused by the
Let me
wording here.
explain. When the Philadelphia and Western Railroad came out to Delaware County and purchased the right-of-way, they were planning to go all the way to Utah. They only got as far as Stratford. It was Vanderbilt money, and the Vanderbilts hated the Pennsylvania Railroad, so they were planning to build a 4-track main line to compete with the Pennsylvania Railroad. They did build a whole series of tunnels across the mountains of Pennsylvania, most of which became the tunnels of the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Maybe I'm not.
Anyway, the long and short of it is, because the right-of-way was designed as a 4-track right-of-way and only 2 tracks were ever used, if you look at the bridges that cross over the Route 100 line, you'll notice it's longer than need be for just 2 tracks. There's space, and there's a maintenance road that SEPTA has. So it's possible to use these other tracks, track spaces, which will never be used, for a trail.
But help me understand what I'm reading. It says, and maybe I'm not just grasping it. It says the right-of-way is wide enough to support 4.
4 tracks.
Right, but only 2 were there.
That's correct.
And what you're asking for authorization is to discuss the feasibility of constructing on the other 2.
That's correct.
My question is, what is, again, why do you have, I'm not opposed to widening, I don't really have a big issue with it, I'm just trying to understand, what does widening it have to do with this connection that you're talking about?
Well,
Actually, let me, Kevin,
But now,
there's an
Kevin, they're
existing
not
rail.
widening. What it is, you got 100 feet, you got a railroad track here, so you got this extra space, which you could, if SEPTA let you, put a trail there. The trolley runs here, and there's extra
Oh, I
space
see.
next to the trolley.
I'm sorry. Okay, I understand now. We're talking about next to the trolley. I thought we were talking about widening the existing trail. Okay.
No.
This is further down. The trail, as you know, the current trail is where the trolley was abandoned. Once you get to Villanova, we would be sharing, we'd have a railway trail. The other benefit, too, is it would give more access to the SEPTA stations. If you live in between a station, you'd have a path going along the track that would take you to, that's fine.
I have a quick question. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, I am in very exuberant support of this resolution. I think this is a fabulous project. I can't wait for it to get started, and I can't wait to ride on it. But my question is this. Do you know of other trails in Pennsylvania that are adjacent to a railway like this?
Yes. Sure.
And is there any kind of issue? Have you had any kind of issue with, being right next to a railway or?
No.
I mean, an active railway.
An active railway. No, there's a whole series of design approaches that are used
Okay.
for that. In fact, the Department of Transportation did a study nationally of about 70 different rail width trails. And depending upon the frequency and volume of rail traffic, there may or may not be a fence. Given that the Route 100 line has a 3rd rail, a fence would be a good idea. And in fact, it would be a good, many places there is no fence right now, and it really is dangerous.
And people actually do walk on it now.
Yes.
Even without.
Which is not
right.
a good idea.
Right.
Right.
All right, well,
But no, rail with trail, you have parts of the Schuylkill River Trail run adjacent to.
And those are
Norfolk Southern.
active railways.
They're very active.
Okay, great. You have my full support and cheerleading, and I am right
Thank
there
you.
for you.
Yeah, I wanted to comment that a lot of this area you're talking about is in my ward. And I ride the Route 100 trolley, and one of the issues for that area is you have about 300 or 400 homes that can't really get to the train station easily. This trail would give them an access to that, and I think that's tremendous.
We've spoken informally with some people at SEPTA. We have not had a SEPTA meeting about this, but one of the issues that will come up with SEPTA, and I know from being many, many years ago a SEPTA employee in their planning department, is how to get more people to the transit system without requiring more parking, because it's very, very hard to create parking. And if people can walk to the station, it's healthier, doesn't require, constructing parking. And what we see is that a rail with trail running along a line, and there are other examples in Washington and elsewhere, does give more people pedestrian or bicycle access to the train station, and that brings more people onto the transit line without the impact of having to build more parking and widen roadways and so forth.
All right, so there's a lot of benefit here. It's not just a trail system, but it's a mass transit system. And
It's a feeder.
I've
into
even
the-
taken my bicycle on the trolley to Norristown to get on the Schuylkill River Trail
Right.
and then ride all the way to the Art Museum. I've also walked the entire township from one side to the other, and I found that it was very difficult to get to the trail from say, Villanova, east, getting to the west side of the township to get onto the trail system. So I welcome this project. I know it's going to take a long time, but I think it's important that we do address it. And there's some very interesting opportunities along there, because when the Route 100 heads north, there's more opportunity for trail extensions there as well. There's a lot of wildlife tracks up in that area that aren't being used, and there's just like gravel paths and whatnot. So there's really a network that could grow towards, even probably towards King of Prussia along that route. So it's interesting.
Bob, assuming you get some traction on the talks with SEPTA, who would you anticipate would do the design work for such a trail?
Well, what would happen is the next step after preliminary meetings and resolutions, DCNR has already seen this. Not a formal meeting, but they attended an East Coast Greenway meeting 2 weeks ago where this was presented, and they said, gee, we'd be interested in funding a feasibility study. So the next step would be a detailed feasibility study. After that, obtaining funds for design, and there would be an RFP process, and it might not be that the entire trail would be designed all at the same time. Some parts are already under design.
So you think there would be DCNR money available for that?
There is
phase?
DCNR money, the Community Conservation Partnership Program money is available.
When we
for
did
feasibility.
the first portion of the trail, there was an 80-20 split under, I think it was CMAQ funding at that time.
Ice-T.
Yeah, but CMAQ was a subset of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And is that sort of funding available now or going to be available in the years to come, if you can prognosticate?
It is available, and we will have a new Transportation Act in this country. It's overdue. It's probably in the next year or two. It's very likely, given all the benefits and all the political support that exists for continuing so-called alternative transportation, that funding will be there.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
further discussion? I move the approval resolution 2010-22.
Second.
We have a letter of support to give you from the Philadelphia Bicycle Coalition, which is probably the major advocacy group in the greater Philadelphia area for the development of new trails. I think John and May also some people in the audience.
We also received today a letter of support from the president of Millbourne Borough Council, and they are actively working on trail extension down there and are thrilled to see this moving forward and somebody taking action.
We definitely appreciate your efforts in this way. No more commissioner comments. Any additional public comment?
Let's just vote.
My name is Kevin Mann. I own a bike shop in Bryn Mawr. It's Haverford Township, Delaware County, and I live in Newtown Square, right on the other side of Radnor. But I can just tell you, it's a great thing that you guys are doing. And one of my big complaints from customers, and I know there's a lot of bike shops, one in Wayne, good one, is they have nowhere to ride. And what you were talking about, getting to the trail is treacherous. So I think it's great, and I hope that you guys continue to support it. And if you need my help, I'm there. So thank you.
Well, we'll need your help working with Haverford.
Yes, I know that. Thank you.
Any further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Bob, just curiosity, how long have you been working on the Schuylkill Trail?
Since 1974.
Well, I mean, it just contextualizes the statements John made about this as a real long-term project.
Touches a lot of communities and many people. It takes time.
Yep, thank you. Next item is the introduction of ordinance 2010-26, award of contract for park signs, Emlyn Tennell and Clem McCrone. It's for a DCED grant, and I'll move the introduction.
Second.
Okay, Bob, can you tell us a little bit, Bill,
Yeah,
tell
I'm
us a
going to
little
take
bit?
the Park and Rec tonight. Bids were opened on June 9th, There were 3 bids. This is a part of a $10,000 grant we received from Community Development, Department of Community and Economic Development in 2008. The Bartish signs was a low bid for the base price and the 2 alternates. This ordinance is being introduced tonight to recommend that we select the Bartish signs of 302 North Washington Street on the amount of $8,840.
So the grant was for 10,000.
Correct.
And low bidder is 8,840.
Mhm.
Is there language in the grant that we can use the balance for
No, you have to return-
landscaping or?
You have to return the balance of the grant if it's not used
Lighting.
for the project.
Okay.
Bill, what's the difference between the alternate 2 and 4?
I don't have that information in front of me. Park and Rec would have, I could get that information back to you if you want more specifics. I believe it was just the, I think one of it was going to be Welcome to Garrett Hill sign as part of that. That was an alternate.
So it was different, an additional sign or different wording on an existing sign?
I don't have that. I'd have to find that information. I'd get that information for you.
Okay.
Any further discussion by the commissioners? Any public comment?
Sarah Pilling from Garrett Hill. At the end of the Garrett Hill process, a nonprofit was formed, the Garrett Hill Community Enhancement Trust, with a system of priorities. And one of their highest priorities is to develop special signage at both ends of the gateway of Garrett Hill, going east and west. So I think, without looking a gift horse in the mouth, maybe the process of Welcome to Garrett Hill should come from within the community itself.
Right,
rather than-
Sarah, I spoke with Tom Blumstrom on this, and there's not even a design finished.
Right.
But the draft design will be forwarded to your committee just to review it
Okay.
and make comment.
Good.
And it
It's
won't
good
have
to
any
keep
effect.
them in the loop.
Absolutely, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We have motion made and seconded for the introduction of this ordinance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So at our next meeting, we will consider this for final adoption, which is July
Yeah, we'll have all the detail for you, the sign specs.
19.
19th. 4th of July events, Rosemont Parade and the fireworks. I've been in this community for 23, 25 years, and I've gone to the Garrett Hill Parade every single year. It's a fantastic, reminds me of a nice small town event, and it's a lot of fun. My daughter rode her bike in the parade many years, and my wife wants to take the grandchild this year. So we're looking forward to it, and it's going to be on July 3rd. And there is a website for the 4th of July parade. You can go on and look at the details. Is there a link off Save Garrett Hill? Don't know. But if you Google Garrett Hill Parade, you'll find it. And then...
John, can I just add to that?
Yes.
It should be garretthillpa.com, and they are accepting donations still. This parade costs, and they've been very frugal with the money, but they spend about $15,000 to $16,000 on this parade. It's there's a celebration after the parade that includes hot dogs and soda.
And a band.
And while the township contributed $4,000, all the rest of the money is contributed by the neighbors of the community. So it's a great thing, but we do need help to keep it going. But they've certainly have found ways to save money over the last couple years. So go to garretthillpa.com.
Thank you, John. And then, as some of you were here in the beginning, saw me purchasing a ticket for the fireworks. That's historically been done. The president of the board buys the first ticket. Just want to double check the date on that. Sunday, July 4th. Rain date is Monday, July 5th. As you know, there's food, entertainment, there's music. It's a great time, and the price is $15 per car load, pedestrians $5, adult teen, and $3 per child. They also have advanced ticket sale that you can save. It's only $10, so that's a pretty healthy savings.
And it's at the high school.
And it's at the high school. Signs are already up. There's an excursion to the Philadelphia Phillies, Friday, August 6th. That'll be run through the Parks and Rec Department, so if you're interested, contact them. You can call the Radnor number, 688-5600, and ask for Parks and Rec. Next item is a request for authorization to go to bid for the Cowan Park Development Grant. Bill, you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. Last year, we actually applied for this, I guess, prior to 2009, but we received the funding in October of 2009 in the amount of $100,000 for a DCNR Cowan Park Grant Rehabilitation Project with a $50,000 match for the township. We're requesting authorization to go to bid to develop the project for the landscaping, demolition, construction.
Move the authorization.
Second.
So this is ordinance 2010-27 that we're introducing.
This is that'll be up next meeting. This is actually just for the
Oh,
demolition.
for information?
This is the demolition and site landscaping.
Okay, so we'll, gotcha. Could you remind, there's 100,000 from state and then 50,000?
Correct.
And what do we, are we projecting a budget yet, or?
I'm sorry?
Do we have a projected budget? Do we think we're gonna be?
At this point, we submitted, the project itself was gonna be $150,000.
Right.
And they gave us 100 with a match of 50. That's involving the comfort station and the other rehabilitation of the other buildings at the location.
Right. And landscaping. and a
Correct.
few, yeah. Maybe, Hank, we can have the kickoff for that when we do the sign over
Yeah,
there.
that would be a good thing when we have the historic marker
Right.
dedication over there sometime in October, I think.
Right. Any further questions about this from the commissioners? Any public comment on this one? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we're not doing 2010-27?
Yeah, it's next
Oh.
time. Let's go.
Oh. 2010-27 is the ordinance for the purchase of the comfort station site furnishings. And this is, we're going to do this through the state, so we
Yeah,
take
that's all part
advantage
of the same grant. What you did with the
Right.
last one is the first phase for the bids for the rest of the project. This part of it can be purchased under state contract. So they're recommending the purchasing the comfort station and site furnishing under state contract in the amount of $55,525.
Okay.
Move the approval.
Moved and second. Any questions from the commissioners? Any public comment?
I have questions.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure. You know, I raised this point, I think, before. We have restrooms in a number of our comfort stations in a number of the parks, and we're spending a lot of money. Now, I get it. We have a big grant here. We have to match that money. But, you know, Clemacrone Park was on the capital budget at one point. Some of the neighbors got together. We went down and spruced it up, and we're very happy with that comfort station. It's built with cinder block. It's not going anywhere. And the question is, we're spending, if I do the math, we have 10 or 11, 12 parks. You know, we're looking at spending over a course of, say, 30 years, over $1 million on these restrooms. And the question is, are we looking at this from a holistic standpoint? Is this the right time to be spending this money? Obviously, we don't want to lose the grant. I don't know when the sunset on the grant is, but we're matching this.
Is the match cash out of pocket or time and effort of people?
It's cash.
It's cash.
It's part of the requirement, the 100,000.
And the point I'm making, I think, is we were able to breathe life into the Clemacrone Park rest building, and everyone's very happy with it. We put some new lighting in. Township and residents worked together on this project, and we were able to save this from demolition. And when we look at that building, we say, you know, maybe it needs a facelift at some point. Maybe we need to put siding on it. Maybe we need to make it ADA compliant. But quite frankly, the bathrooms are very large, so there's no point. There's no issue with making them ADA compliant. But I would just like this board to consider that. I know this is somewhat subsidized, so I don't want to necessarily. come out against this project, but at the same time, I look at the money we're spending, and I'm thinking about the climate we're in, the economic climate we're in, and I'm scratching my head saying, do we just need a coat of paint over there to get us through? And can we use that grant money for something else? So, you know.
But get us through to what?
Bill, you want to comment on
Well,
You're just really delaying it. in my
I don't know.
estimation.
I don't know the restroom and what it looks like.
that? Well, to
Or
the best of my
is it
knowledge, that
falling
restroom
apart?
hasn't been operable for 20 years.
Hasn't been used.
Which restaurant?
Cowan,
The bathrooms have been operational.
they have?
Yes.
And again, you know, I look at what we do with Clement Crone Park. Really, a lot of fresh paint made the place look a lot better. Now, functionally, I guess the plumbing had issues at one time or another, but it's all functional, and it didn't cost taxpayers anything, really.
But the reason you did that, because there was no money in the budget to do anything with it. Here we got a grant, we got a chance
Well,
to
I
upgrade
have to tell you, I
something.
voluntarily stepped back on pushing for that to be on the capital budget because I saw the poor economic condition we're headed into. I said, do we need to spend $100,000 to fix something that really just needed paint?
But a year or two from now, it might blow up, John. You might need a whole new
It's
bathroom.
not going to blow up. It's been there 30 years. It'll be there another 30. It's cinder block. and
Well,
it
I'm
may
talking
need
about
a
the
new roof.
plumbing. I'm not talking about the cinder block.
John, I think you bring up a better issue that's not about either of these two bathrooms. It's about strategic planning and capital funding, that as we move forward, one of the things I'm hoping we do is get a lot more public involvement through something like the CBFAC as they mature, as to what things the public is willing to spend money on. Garrett Hill is a great place, so you have people that are very involved and dedicated. I don't know that that's the same in every neighborhood.
It
Not that
is,
they don't
it
have
is,
great
it
people,
is,
but
it
willing
is,
to get out
it
there and do
is,
the
it
sweat
is,
equity.
It is. Every neighborhood's the same, John. Don't say
Mr. Chairman.
I
Garrett
think-
Hill's special.
If I may, just to add, I believe this grant is specifically for a district,
Yep.
so it can't be crossed over those types of areas. So it has to be used within that area, so the decision is not to move it amongst those areas.
Oh, no.
It's whether to proceed in that particular
No,
area.
I think John had, it's the bigger picture that, how we're spending money
And-
and.
well, so-
Hank, how long have you been
exactly.
working on this?
A number of years, and as I recall, this is one of the capital projects that survived the board's recommendations to cut. And it was a high priority at that particular point, and it hasn't gotten any less.
I agree, and one of the reasons why I supported it at the time was that there was a $100,000 grant backing it. But what I'm looking at now is that $55,000 is about to be spent on the first phase on the bathroom, and the other 100 is going to be used for something else entirely, I guess, you know, some other phase. And what's different is we are still spending too much money, and we are going to end this year with a fund balance that will not be adequate to carry us for the first quarter of next year. So I'm just trying to be cautious about spending. And, you know, if we're not going to reflect on the economic situation we're in now, when are we going to reflect on it? And I'm not trying to kill this project. I'm getting us, I would like us to think more globally in terms of why are we spending the money now versus later. Can we just paint that bathroom and spruce it up? You know, can we put a new roof on a bathroom, get another 20 years out of it, and paint the building to keep it nice? You know, we had a graffiti issue down at Clement Crone. Staff were able to come out and paint that over, and it looks new again. So it's a question of, you know, how do we want to spend money? I don't think this is badly spent, but at the same time, I think it's money we may not want to spend.
Well,
Can I
the
just-
Park and Rec Board, we've spent years on this with the Park and Rec Board, the community, and the commissioners. We got a $100,000 grant with a $50,000 match, and everybody's on board with doing this, John. We put new bathrooms at South Devon, and we did them at Donna Lane Field. We don't have them over here, but this is an opportunity to move forward to take care of this situation, and we're going to have to deal with Garrett Hill
If I
in
could
another 4 or 5 years.
If I could interject, I've spoken with Tom Corrick, who is the chair of the Park and Rec Commission, and he said that their group has spent a tremendous amount of time assessing the facilities and prioritizing which ones need attention. This is at the top of their list, and we're simply taking the recommendation of that group of people who worked really, really hard on it. And I don't really think that we should back off of this, even though we are in tough budgetary times, because this is part of the capital program. that did survive the cuts that the staff recommended, and we cut it to the bone, John. So I think we are being very responsible fiscally, because we have gone through that process to eliminate those projects that can be put off. I don't think this is one of them.
Yeah, and just real quickly, this little background, this grant, it was actually for another project. You can't extend this grant another time, you're going to lose this money. It actually had been moved to this project because the project, I think, was trail extension at some point had fallen through. We had legislative support, so basically if we don't use this money, we're going to lose it. That's still another point I would make.
Any further board discussion? Any public discussion?
Sarah Pilling from Garrett Hill. I just want to remind you that a comfort station for Emlyn to Nellfield has been a projected capital budget for at least 6 years. And I know people who do not drink water for at least an hour or two before they come to the game because they're not about to use that smelly porta potty. You actually have a potential public health issue because the kids aren't drinking because they won't use the porta potty and they're getting dehydrated in the heat. So I just want to remind you, this should be a high priority too. That field is used 6 days a week in the spring for baseball with lots of parents, lots of little kids. It's a wonderful place, but it's really lacking a comfort station, and I don't think you need to put in one that costs $100,000. I'd just like to remind you that it was budgeted but knocked off for at least, how many years have you been a commissioner, John? Okay, so we're talking at least 5 years. It got taken off, and I've spoken to Bob about it, and the Enhancement Trust is going to be looking at a way to begin a process to see if they can't get the money for a comfort station. So thank you.
I'm one of those parents that carefully monitors liquid intake at that park every week. We are there all the time, and I totally agree. I do want to just submit that, over at Enki and perhaps also at Tennelle, we have a great Little League organization who is willing to work with us and try and come up with funding, because that is the heavy use. It's Little League. It's Little League parents and Little League kids. And I think we should continue to encourage that kind of private funding of the people who are actually using the facility and really needing those that infrastructure. So I'd like to see us, continue to encourage that.
Susan Stern, Newtown Square. Gosh, I'm actually listening to everybody and trying to think if there's a win-win-win, which we, I guess, don't want to lose the grant money. John's concerned about spending $50,000 of township money on one facility, and we have another park, Emlyn Tennelle, that needs facilities, and there's a lot of talk about bringing community involvement in. I'm wondering if the grant can be applied to 2 parks. Take the $150,000, grant and matching money, and can we build 2 different comfort stations, perhaps not as gold-plated and perhaps not with all the landscaping around Cowan Park, but a way to meet rather than just one park's needs being met, 2 parks, and bring in those outside sources.
I think Bill addressed that. I don't think it can be, can it?
No, it's a legislative grant. It has to stay within a certain legislator's district that helps support the grant. And unfortunately, that doesn't cross the line. And I think, and just to be clear, it's more than just a comfort station. And there's other improvements at the site location. I believe there's benches and I think there's a facility there also being upgraded. So I just want to be clear about that as well.
Any further public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have an appointment for the Open Space Committee. We had advertised this for quite a while, and Gayla McCluskey's been chosen by the board to serve on the Open Space Committee.
She's applied. I'll move her appointment.
Yes.
Second.
Thank you. Made and second. Any discussion by the commissioners? Any public comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey, that's it. Public health. Public safety.
No report?
The first item on public safety is the traffic safety report of May 18, 2010. You have before you that report. AJ, any comments about that one?
I have one question about it, if it's all right. For item number 2, the staff track committee recommends extending the single yellow line. Were more extensive traffic calming measures considered? And if so, why were they eliminated?
We also looked at a three-way stop. Obviously, it did not meet the warrants for that. We felt that by extending the yellow line, what most people were doing were cutting the corner. So if you couldn't see with the bushes with the traffic, people would cut the corners. We figured extending the yellow line would delineate the lane of travel. And reinforcing the stop bar and cutting some of the brush back would alleviate almost all the problems that were discussed at that intersection.
And whose warrants would it not meet? Is that a state requirement or a township requirement?
That's correct. For a three-way stop sign, the state has to meet certain warrants. One of them are the amount of crashes at the intersection, and there were minimal at that intersection.
And so we don't have the authority to change that? That's not us? Is that us adopting a PennDOT standard, or is that us being required to use a PennDOT standard?
We're required to use those warrants for a
And then
stop sign.
what about more extensive physical? What about some kind of speed bump or something like that? Is that not available to us?
Not at that particular location. As for speeding, somebody would have to take the torch up and go around for a petition for speed humps. I don't believe that Maplewood Avenue would meet the criteria under the volume as well.
Okay, so will this happen? Will the yellow line be extended as you've indicated based upon this, or does something further have to happen?
No, that's great. There was one there. It's actually worn down. So when we mean extending it, it was actually there but worn down. You can see where the yellow line is now. We're just going to repaint it back up to the stop bar.
Very good. So that'll be something that you'll take for action and do as there's no more action from the board to make that happen?
Once we approve this, they take the action.
That's correct.
I'll move the approval of staff traffic report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other questions? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
The next item is the request for approval of the Tiger Woods Golf Classic reimbursement for extra duty police detail. AJ, want to brief us on this, please?
This is a revised contract that was made up by the township solicitor. Tiger Woods Corporation is requesting a contract with us to provide police services. They had a standard boilerplate with language that wasn't appropriate for police services. The solicitor, I believe, mirrored it on one that we already have in place for another rental in the township, and I would move or request that the board move to accept the contract. You'll see in Exhibit A where the police officers are. I have one redaction due to the safety and security of not only the people at that location, but my officers as well.
Would this be for officers from Radnor to work over at Newtown Square or in the township itself?
It covers both. We've been asked by Newtown to cover a few spots in their township, but the vast majority of these locations are within the confines of Radnor Township.
Okay. And this would be a contract with the Tiger Woods Charity Event Corporation and not Aronimink Golf Club, correct?
That's correct.
Move the approval.
Second?
I just had a quick question. Is this staffing going to affect our needs over a holiday weekend in Radnor? I mean, is it going to put a strain on?
This is all time and a half voluntary. I don't see a problem with regular staffing.
Okay.
And I have a question for Mr. Rice. This non-disclosure agreement, we're not binding or this wouldn't bind our officers to anything that is out of the ordinary?
No, I looked at this, Don, and the original agreement was sort of a strange agreement. The non-disclosure was part of the original agreement, so I drafted the reimbursement, which is really, we wanted to make sure that we were paid at the proper rate. The non-disclosure, I think the manager would sign that, and other than the right to know or something like that, I mean, we paragraph 4 says it will execute the non-disclosure subject to disclosure of something that might be required under state or federal law. This is going to be and there's some security reasons why I think they want a disclosure like this executed. They're going to be using some facilities in the township in addition to traffic control, which will occur, and security at the golf course itself. So I'm fine with this. I didn't like what was originally presented to us. We had that original agreement had us indemnifying them for any and all claims. So we tossed that out of the window. We kept the disclosure agreement, which my understanding is the other police departments and the other townships have all signed off on already.
So is this obligating our officers individually, or the township, or both?
Just the township, the township. It's the township's obligation. We're authorizing the officers to participate and provide police services in accordance with this agreement.
If I can, just to clarify, these are off-duty officers. These are not
Yeah.
on-duty officers. This is all off-duty officers. So I think this addressed the question Commissioner Schaefer had in regards to this will not impact. These are off-duty officers.
I mean, Exhibit B seems to me to be an agreement between the individual officers and the event sponsor. Do I understand it incorrectly? Exhibit B. It seems to me like it obligates the officers individually.
The non-disclosure agreement, which is referenced in the agreement that the township is executing, incorporates that. So it's the township's obligation. I mean, we're not going to have the individual officers sign off on anything.
I mean, all the language is written for the individual, though. I agree not to publish books. I will keep information confidential.
The township.
Very good.
Bob, can I ask clarification on your answer, because it confused me? You say these officers are off-duty.
Correct.
But really aren't, I mean, if they're out directing traffic at
No,
Lancaster and Route...
they're on duty, they're being paid, we're gonna pay them,
I
we're
understand,
gonna get reimbursed.
I understand, that's why I'm asking Bob the question.
And they'll be
They're
technically,
actually
they're on duty.
on duty,
Yes.
and the cost of them is being reimbursed.
They are on-duty officers. They are not scheduled
Okay.
that impact our standards.
Gotcha.
But also based on the reimbursement is the reimbursement
Gotcha.
at those
But
costs
they're
that the
on-
lieutenants.
You said
spoke.
they were off duty, but they're actually on duty. That's what I wanted to clarify.
They're not on schedule.
If I may, this is no different than an event at Villanova
Yeah.
or a party that somebody hires off-duty.
I had no issue with that. I just
No,
didn't like
trying to
his
say
choice
it's
of,
pretty much not
of
anything different
party.
except for the agreement.
Let's vote.
Okay, we have motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
You representing Tiger?
You own a Ronimick golf course, right?
No, I don't. But I am a member, so
Yeah.
I think it's probably
Yeah,
appropriate that I abstain.
very good.
Public Works and Engineering.
I move authorization to go out to bid for line striping with Middletown Township.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any questions, comments? Board, any public comments? All in favor?
Aye.
I move authorization to go to bid for de-icing salt.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Didn't need any comments on that.
That's it under Public Works.
Old business.
I have an issue I wanted to bring up. I wanted to talk a little bit about the progress of our Citizens Budget Finance and Advisory Committee. For those of you, many of you may know, they've had their second public meeting about a week ago, and they've issued some interim recommendations. If you didn't come to the meeting or are interested, you can watch the presentation and see the recommendations on the website, radnor.com. They're doing a fabulous job. We were all very grateful for, it's just really a very educated and talented and dedicated group that have already proved to be a great asset to us. We're instituting some of the recommendations that they've put forth. So I think we're all very grateful and very happy that we've set this up. Of their 6 recommendations that they made in this interim period, 2 of them have directly involved the open space program. And as chair of the Open Space Program, I just wanted to address those two recommendations, pull them out and address them in particular. The first one involves the realty transfer tax. We have a practice in our township of taking 25% of our realty transfer tax and putting it into our open space fund, which is fund number 22 for open space spending. They have made the recommendation that we stop that practice and we use that earmarked money, that 25%, for general fund expenses. And for better or for worse, the reality is that we actually already do that. We have consistently for several years taken the money that comes into that account from that earmark and actually spent out of that account on debt financing and general fund expenses. And in fact, for 2010, this board in December passed a budget that had anticipated about $600,000 coming in to that account, and then spending $800,000 out of that account on debt financing and on general fund just expenses. So I'm not making any comment on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the reality is it's a practice that we already do.
I would just add that we passed an ordinance when I was a commissioner. It was my recommendation that we do that, and the ordinance specifically says that the money is used for the funding of the $10 million open space bond issue. We've taken it one step further in Radnor. Ever since we passed that back in 1993 or 94, we were taking in $300,000. A couple years ago, we were taking $800,000. That money has been used to fund every open space bond issue in Radnor Township, not just the $10 million, so that the Radnor taxpayers, out of their property tax, have not paid for the $10 million bond issue and all the open space we bought with that, but all the other open space that we've funded has been funded out of this real estate transfer tax. So you only pay this money if you buy and sell a house. So no one that hasn't bought or sold a property in Radnor hasn't paid any of that $10 million bond issue, the money that we spent buying all the land in Radnor. And I could list the 10 pieces of parcel that we bought, but that bond issue was approved by the voters. So that's pretty well set in stone as an ordinance.
Yeah, and the long and the short of it is, that practice occurs. We do use that money for general fund expenses. So,
for bond expenses.
So, the second recommendation that came out of this group regarding the open space program was they recommended that this board institute a complete moratorium on all open space acquisition. And I think that would be unwise for two main reasons. But before I give you those reasons, I just want to say that I completely understand and I can see where they're coming from. I get that recommendation. And as a matter of fact, the Open Space Committee, we've met twice since I've been chair, and at the very first meeting we had that on the agenda, that exact issue. Is there an appetite right now for open space acquisition? And the answer was a resounding and unanimous no. This is a pretty bad financial situation, and there is no appetite. And we are not going to go out and go willy-nilly spending on open space. This is not the right atmosphere for that. However, having a complete moratorium, I think, would be colossally unwise. And for the first reason is that, it is very possible that in the near future, or the future, this community will be faced with some once-in-a-lifetime extraordinary opportunities to protect extraordinary landscapes that, should we not take those opportunities and allow those have our hands tied not to make a decision, it would severely and negatively impact the character of this township for the long term, permanently and forever. And I'm not just talking about large parcels, I'm also talking about slivers of parcels. One of our goals is to connect our trails and have our parks connected with trails. And often that comes up with small slivers of properties, small opportunities, that when they come up, you have to be ready to move, because once you lose those opportunities, whether it's a small parcel or a big parcel, you never get it back. And you can't, in 3 or 4 or 5 years, when the economy gets better, say, oh, wait, we really want that. Let's undevelop that parcel that just went to development. They're not making any more land. And you have to weigh, this board has to weigh the short-term economic challenges against the long-term effects of letting some of these extraordinary landscapes go to development. And if you have a moratorium, you can't even have that discussion. The second reason I think that it would be unwise to have a moratorium is more substantial reason, and I really challenge and I disagree with the premise of that thinking, and the premise being that it costs a lot of money for us to preserve open space, and that we can't afford it, and that it's a big financial drain. That is all true. It is a financial drain. It does cost money. A bond issue costs you money for 30 years. However, I've been doing this for quite some time, and I've done a lot of research on this, and I assure you that very often, if you have a very important parcel, a large parcel, that you choose to let go to development because you feel it's too expensive to protect with a bond, very often that ends up costing your community more money in the long run. Say you have 100 acre, and the reason for that is that very things that make it important for preserving, it's beautiful, its location, its natural resources, that also makes it a prime candidate for residential development. So if you have a 100-acre parcel and it's in R1 zoning, you can protect it and buy it and pay for it for 30 years. After 30 years, you're done, you own it, the only free and clear, and all you have to pay for is maintenance. If you pass up that opportunity and let it go to development, then in R1 zoning, you get about 100 houses. You get about 200 cars every day on your roads. You have to service 100 houses with sanitation, with roads, with sewers, you get the idea. Most significantly, you get school children in 100 houses. And that can be 50, 100, 200 kids who you're paying right now $16,000 to $17,000 for per head every year. Now, and in 5 years, and in 10 years, and in 30 years. And in 30 years, you're paying for those 100 kids at $2,040, not $2,010. Where on the other hand, in 30 years, you could be making your last payments on that parcel in $2,010, not $2,040. So my point is, it's a very complex decision financially. Put aside all of the aesthetics and the character of our township and the natural resources. Financially, it's a complex decision as to what's better for us, whether to purchase and preserve or to allow to go to development. And I think it would be unwise to take that deliberation out of the hands of this board, because this board is not only thinking about what's good next year and the year after. This board has to decide what this township's going to look like in 30 years and what tax burden we're going to be putting on our residents 30 years from now. So, having said all that, I am so appreciative of the work and the recommendations from this committee. Keep up the good work. I look forward to hearing more from them. I know we all appreciate their work. And I hope that the residents really tune in and pay attention, because it's a great group coming up with some great ideas. Thanks.
And I would just like to say that we, the Board of Commissioners, we have a self-imposed moratorium. We realize the economic situation, and we have a self-imposed moratorium, and we're helped in that moratorium by the fact that there's no developers developing in this economy. So hopefully in a year or two or three, when the economy picks up and people want to develop, we'll be in a better position financially to acquire open space.
I will throw through a few comments in on this one. First off, I want to thank the CBFAC members for getting together and reviewing all the township financials and taking a really good look at the financial condition that we're in. I think it's important to recognize that this board this committee is in place to make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. I like the recommendations they're making. As much as I love open space and want to preserve open space, when I take a closer look at the debt that we're in, we have $60 million of debt on the township books. We owe $90 million by 2025. And taking on more debt at this moment, meaning this year and maybe even next year, might be a bad decision for this board and may have a negative impact on future boards. One thing we have to recognize is that we don't have a strong fund balance like we did 2 years ago. So our bond rating may not be as good as we want it to be in the future. And taking on more debt simply puts us in a worse position if we do that right now. So as much as I agree with what Elaine is saying, I also have to say that I appreciate these recommendations to us, because it really is, in my opinion, you know, it's an outsider's view of what's going on here, and it's very helpful to see that and not feel the political pressures necessarily from individual taxpayers. But in this case, with all the debt that we have, I looked at we had a audit committee meeting this morning, and what I saw was that our liabilities were about 10 million higher than our assets. And what that means is that we've borrowed about $10 million for assets that had short life and no longer exist. And that's not good government. Good government is borrowing money to benefit current taxpayers and future taxpayers, meaning buying a new, building a new library, for example, something that would benefit future taxpayers. But when it comes to open space, it's hard to value that. So the question is, would we build a new library this year or next year? Probably not. This is not the right time to do that. So would we buy open space this year or next year? Maybe not. And like Bill mentioned, that this, luckily for us, this is not a good climate for builders and developers either. So we have the benefit in some ways of the economy holding back development. So anyway, thank you again to the CBFAC for coming to us with 6 interim recommendations. I like all of them. And most importantly, they came to us with a recommendation to refinance some bonds, and we looked at that last meeting, and we're looking at saving around $650,000. So I appreciate their comment on that. It definitely drove us in that direction. And you know, I think we still have a lot of thinking to do on this open space.
John, the thing that we haven't discussed, though, is that $10 million difference values the assets at the original purchase price. And for example, the $10 million of open space that we've purchased thus far, I have a sense are probably worth closer to $30 million these days. So it distorts
John,
the view. But the reality
John,
is,
some of the borrowing, $5, $6, $7 million, is to put sewers in. Okay,
I'm not arguing that. I'm only talking about open space, Bill.
No, but I'm just saying that $10 million he's talking about, half of that could be sewers that aren't valued. You know, people.
Okay, let's be real. Let's be real here. We approved a budget last year that had about $1 million of financing in it to pay for short life assets. We agreed. We knew this. We did this. I pushed for a fund balance policy that gradually gets us to the point where we're pay as we go, meaning we use cash, operating money, to pay for short life assets like police cars, pickup trucks, things that don't last more than a few years. But prior boards, including this board and prior boards, have spent about $10 million on short life assets, and they use 30-year bond money to do it. And that's bad government. And what I hope to do is shed as much light on this while I'm on the board so that it doesn't happen again. Because we can't really undo what's happened. It's been done. It's already done. The police cars that were paid for with bonds 20 years ago are still being paid for by taxpayers today. Still being paid for. 25 years ago, we bought police cars, still being paid for today by taxpayers. Those cars are in a landfill. So.
Yeah, but John, none of this discussion's about that. This is about open space.
Well, but it's in the context.
And it's also electoral debt approved by 80%.
When the economy was strong.
No, people value in this township value open space.
John, what year was it approved by the electorate?
2.5 years ago.
No, it was in 2006. 2006 was the top of the stock market. It was the top of the economic boom. It was the top of the housing market. You couldn't have asked for a better time to borrow money. It was a great time to borrow the money. But
John, when we have to do it 2 or 3 years from now, it'll be a great time.
It probably won't. Well, that's the point I'm trying to make, that this is probably not the best time to borrow the money.
No, but by the same token, as Bill pointed out, there is nobody jumping up to sell us land right now. And I agree.
And then I think we all agree.
Several of the recommendations are already in the process of being implemented that came from that group. So they're doing good work for us.
Yeah, well, what we want them to look into is our capital budget, John, and how we don't do that. That's what we asked them to do, so I hope they'll get to that.
That's part of their agenda. Any other old business? Any new business? You want to discuss the settlement? John?
As far as Don, The board, as you know, met in executive session to discuss a resolution of a business tax assessment case. And what I'd like to do is just summarize what the resolution is of that tax assessment case. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights Act has very strict constraints on information that can be released in these types of cases, and the documents can't be released. They can be discussed in executive session, and what was discussed tonight was a resolution, which I'll describe as settlement number 2010-6-21. It's a resolution in lieu of litigation of a business tax assessment case in the amount of $300,000. What I'm asking is for the board to, and the board is aware of the general facts involving this, that the board vote to approve this and authorize a settlement at this time.
Move the approval.
Motion moved and second. Any further discussion? Public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Bob, you want to?
Sure. Before I go to that, I'd also like to ask the solicitor to speak on one other item briefly.
At the last meeting, there was an issue raised regarding the zoning ordinance amendment involving the Rite Aid drive-through, which the board approved. Bob and I discussed this. I discussed this with Matt, and just the board has gotten a written communication from me on this, outlining the background and the history as to how this went through the process. There's some conflicting provisions that you have in your charter versus what you have in your, actually multiple provisions in your charter, your administrative code, and your zoning ordinance when it comes to ordinances. In any event, and this is a written document which I think Mr. Gemmer questioned at the last meeting. I can provide this to Barron after the meeting so he can understand how this got, if the board doesn't have any objection, how we got to where we were when this was adopted. But the ordinance, the original ordinance was introduced in August of last year. It was then advertised in October. It was not adopted. It was tabled, and there was some fairly substantial changes made to it at that time. The revised ordinance was then introduced on January 25th, and at that meeting there were some minor tweaks to it, and because of that, and because of some procedures under the planning code, it was resent then to the two planning commissions, your planning commission and the Delaware County Planning Commission. There wasn't any specific hearing date set the night it was introduced. And that's the issue that came up at your last meeting, whether that should have been done. In any event, it went back to the two planning commissions and then was advertised for the board's meeting in May, and you adopted it that night. And this sort of highlights some of the provisions in the charter that I view are outdated, but in your charter for ordinances, it essentially says once you introduce an ordinance, it gets advertised by the township secretary. There's no mention of setting a date. It just, by itself, it's self-executing, and it gets advertised. Your zoning ordinance says something a little bit differently. It says that the board will set a hearing date at a public meeting. That wasn't done, as far as I can tell, on January 25th. I think what happened that night was, and I've had someone listen to the audio, is that there was an explanation of how this was going to occur. It would be back to this, it would be advertised, come back to this board in May, but no specific date was set. And that's the issue. Putting all that aside, we then, once it was introduced under the charter, it was advertised. There's other requirements under the municipality's planning code. It's got to be lodged with the Delaware County Law Library. If you change it at all, it's got to go back to the Planning Commission, and that's what you did in January when it was resent back. With no more changes after that, it was then advertised. So I think the issue here is one of, there's some inconsistency. To the extent that there was a question raised that the ordinance might be invalid because of that inconsistency, I disagree. I think it's a valid ordinance. There are several cases going on in the state involving municipality planning code provisions that don't get complied with. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has basically said unless there's some constitutional due process issue, these types of defects are not going to void a zoning ordinance. So you have my written description of what happened. You have my opinion. I can provide that to Barron after the meeting tonight or tomorrow. I wouldn't recommend the board take any further action at this point on this.
There's no issue with making that document that is attorney-client open to anyone who wants to see it, in your opinion?
I've got no problem with that.
So that would be my
Well,
recommendation.
this board has to agree to do that.
understand.
yeah.
That
So
would be
does
my
everyone agree that John can release that? All right.
My only question is, in the future, when you advertise a public meeting and we're going to vote on it, that we have a separate resolution right under that? You know, in other words, you have the notice of the public meeting and you advertise it, but there wasn't a separate motion there to alert the public that we were actually going to vote.
Bill, the legal ad itself.
No, I understand that.
You know,
No,
it
I'm
says-
fine with that. All I'm saying is, it'd be a lot clearer to me if we had a public hearing, and right under that, there was notice that the resolution, the ordinance was there to be passed.
In the newspaper notice.
No, in our agenda.
Oh,
On the
okay.
agenda. In other words, you have a
Okay.
public hearing, but there wasn't anything on the public that stated that we were actually going to vote, even though we advertised we were. I think, all I'm saying is, it's clear to me if we have a public hearing, and if we're going to vote the same night on a public hearing, then the next item under that should be approval of that ordinance.
It may also help to have on the agenda for the introduction, an agenda item saying that we're going to set the date of the public hearing.
Yeah.
That would be.
Because this was an oversight, in my opinion.
We've never had that. We've
yeah.
always said, all right, set a public hearing, but it should
Right.
say right there, set a public hearing and a recommended date right there. Yeah. All right.
Okay, Bob?
What I have in front of you this evening is a proposed draft of a revised agenda for the Board of Commissioners to consider. The goal behind this is to maximize the efficiency of the meetings as well as maximize public participation. As you can see, the layout is similar to what is had. Part of it is with the different committee reports would be with some of the topics and items for discussion that have added some significant times to the meeting, the potential of having those in subcommittee meetings which have been established, but having those subcommittee meetings which would be open to the public, but having a lot of dialogue and conversation in which public comments can be made in the several meetings before this meeting. I know that the public has made a lot of good conversations and suggestions. However, due to the time elements as well, whether residents are willing to sit for 3 or 4 hours or 5 hours before they have the opportunity to comment, I think with some potential changes here would streamline that and actually allow additional public participation in this, knowing that when residents come to these types of meetings, one, it's difficult to just publicly speak, but also in front of the board, in front of the public, as well as on TV, as well, to be able to speak. I think, some of these opportunities would allow additional public participation and for the commissioners to consider some of these different suggestions that may come about, but also from additional staff time as well, too, that could be spent working with the commissioners along to coming up with resolutions on a number of these issues. So this would be in front of you for your consideration and review, additional conversation as well. Added to this would be a manager's report in which the township manager would speak on relative issues affecting the township. Also, in addition, which the solicitor had come up with for the solicitor attached report on litigation that is going on within the township or legal issues facing the township for him to be able to report on as well. So again, the goal is to maximize the efficiency of the meetings as well as maximize resident input.
So you do want our questions and comments now, or do you want us to sleep on it and get back to you? Or?
You can forward those if you want them now. You can forward those to me. I mean, I think this is a work in progress. I mean, I'm not looking at anything where this is going to change overnight, because it's not. But I think the opportunity to begin the conversation, discussion, and to have the input on this, I think is going to be very, very beneficial.
The other thing, Bob, is wherever we land, I'm certainly willing to consider reviewing and doing it differently. Maybe there's a good meeting coming up in between now and the end of the year to kind of run it as you're proposing, sort of as a pilot to see whether it works better or not. I would certainly be willing to entertain that, and if you find the right meeting.
And I think a lot of this is just for the time in the last meeting, 6-hour meeting. I'm not sure how many folks that wanted maybe to stay around it when it hit 10 o'clock, some left. But if there was an item that was sitting later in the agenda, you would have to wait at least till midnight at that particular time to speak. And knowing how valuable your time is, as well as I look at department heads sitting here as well, maybe using their time more efficiently as well.
John, have you had a chance to take a look at the draft agenda and compare it against the charter and the code, make sure that it's adequate?
I haven't compared it against the charter or the code, but I don't think that there's any specific agenda, process or procedure. I don't recall ever seeing anything like that in the charter or the code. This is, it's a little bit different format. Bob and I did talk about this at the end of last week. One of the things that, and I would just comment on under a solicitor's report, one of the things I would report on you is that there's been an ordinance advertised and it's coming up next month, or whatever the date is. I mean, I'm used to doing that type of thing as an agenda item in most townships that we represent. And there's usually a manager's report that would report on similar types of things. I wouldn't go into any detail on specific litigation, but there may be something that I don't get an opportunity in the executive session to raise with the board that I may want to raise, or at least get some direction on. So, I mean, I'm sort of used to having that type of a role. Many meetings, I have nothing new to report, and that's usually a good thing. But, there's things like that I think it helps. It helps me. I get some direction. I think it would help Bob. He gets some direction also. But, Hank, I will look at that. I'll look at the charter. I'll look at the code. I don't recall that there's anything in there about how you run your meetings. Well, there's some general provisions that are more restrictive than the Sunshine Act. I know that. That are in your charter, but not about the format or the layout.
Isn't the roll call member self-evident? We're sitting here, you know exactly who's here and who's not here. What's the roll call about?
I think the roll call in the beginning there is actually the roll call for attendance, but also too by the charter, some of the changes that have to be made is a roll call vote on a lot of the legislation as well. That cannot be just by a unanimous consent. It'll actually be by that. But this is a format that I've been accustomed to in the past, so it's just a formality, a format, parliamentary procedure. So it's more of procedure of how these meetings
Well, then you have
operate.
committee reports, and you've taken everything out of the committee reports. There's nothing for us to say at committee reports because you moved it somewhere else.
Well, I think a lot of this is committee reports. My hope would be is that there would actually be committee meetings, subcommittee meetings that you'd report on what took place in those subcommittee meetings.
Well, let's just take an example. Over the last 20 years, there's maybe 2 public works meetings on sewers. The Park and Rec meeting, there may have been 2. I mean, we're not meeting on a regular basis with these committees.
And my suggestion from my observation, and I granted not that long, is I think there should be a lot more work in the subcommittees. Because I think when we look at the different parks, we just spoke about restrooms this evening. There should be a lot of conversation of those in subcommittees, not particularly taking place at this meeting, which adds time to this meeting.
So
But-
are these subcommittee meetings so let's say we have 3 commissioners on the Parks and Rec subcommittee. we also have a Parks and Rec Board. Are these subcommittees in conjunction with the Parks and Rec Board or separate?
This is separate. This is the Board of Commissioners. This is your subcommittee in which you can establish capital replacements of equipment or projects or what's going on. I think when we look at the storm sewer projects, I think there's a lot that's facing the township here. I think just looking at some of the DVDs that Bill has forwarded to me and looking in the township is looking at serious commitments to infrastructure buried under the ground, that those cannot be handled in this particular setting unless you're going to extend these meetings far into the early morning hours. I also look at, I'll just use an example of the Rite Aid project. That was one there. There was a lot of comment from residents, but there could have been some of those items incorporated into that plan, maybe hearing more from the representative from Rite Aid of how they could work with this, getting input from the Wayne Business Association, held at that subcommittee so that when that legislation comes here, a lot of the details have been worked out and not in this particular forum here. Those are open public meetings. There are public that's invited. And I think, that, again, the efficiencies of time and how we develop these particular decisions that the board will make are made outside of this particular meeting time. Because there are times that it could be 2 hours of conversation where it might just be, we're just going to go ahead and vote and move this on without that type of consideration.
I think some things we want to consider on that front is, will those subcommittee meetings be televised? And obviously, I would like them to be televised. The other question I have is, while we think, what I've learned from sitting here for 2 years is that it almost seems that when an issue is contentious, the public, God bless them, will come out at every opportunity to say the same things. So because of the charter requirement and parliamentary rule that requires us to, after the board is done discussing an issue, after it's been moved and seconded, there's a board discussion, but immediately goes to public comment. Mm-hmm. We cannot eliminate, as far as I can tell, we cannot eliminate that requirement. So while we can probably vet lots of these issues in subcommittee, in the end, those same folks will need to probably come out a second time to discuss. So we may or may not, who knows, we may or may not see efficiency with this, but I'm willing to give anything a try, especially if it improves their government action.
Any other new business? Public participation.
One of those people who waited 3 hours. With regard to Elaine's comments about what are you calling it, the CBFAC, thank you. I watched the meeting with a lot of interest, and the one thing that strikes me, and I've had this same conversation at the school board, so, it's not just here, whether I'm paying my tax bill to the school district or to Radnor Township, on this side, I don't really care. I really don't. It's the same money out of my checking account, regardless of which bank account it gets deposited in here at the township. And so when they were making a recommendation to look at open space and kind of audit the open space in the township, I guess I would ask that if you're going to take that recommendation from them, ask them to please also look at the school district properties. Not because those are your assets, not because they're your purview, but because in terms of my experience as a township resident, I don't really care that Emlyn Tunnel is owned by the school district. I care that it's a ball field, that it's available for use. And decisions that one board makes that might impact the township as a whole, it's really important to understand everything we have out there. Which also brings me to a recommendation that I actually made to the CBF, it's hard, CBFAC, thank you, is there a way for the township and the school district to get together on restructuring our total debt? Are there legal costs to be saved? Can we get a better rating in refinancing and restructuring our debt all together? And I don't know if that's legally allowed because there's two different entities here, but if there's a way to save me, a resident of Radnor, money. And I also think it's really important in all these conversations to understand that in as much as we have, $60 million in debt and $32 million in interest, whatever the numbers are, The school district is in way bigger debt.
Their debt is, I think it's 115 million?
Right,
Something.
way bigger debt. And so my property values and my, which then impacts the real estate transfer taxes here and how much people are willing to pay for a home, it's all working together, which impacts this township board. And I'm happy to go say the same thing to the school district. I've been saying it, is that there's a lot of people in Radnor who only follow what happens here. And then there's a whole other group of people who only follow school district. God bless my husband that, he doesn't care that I come to both and keep a pretty good watch on what's happening in both. But people in Radnor need to understand that we're pushing, $200 million in debt. And that's really, really, really at risk. So those were two comments I wanted to make. And then I had a question about the audit. I don't ever recall seeing an audit presentation like we saw tonight. Is that relatively new? The formal presentation, we've seen that before?
Yeah.
We always have it.
So some of the comments that came to light when the forensic audit was done, were those comments specifically left out of the public audit presentations that were done? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying, John?
Well, okay, so these formal presentations have always occurred.
Okay.
But I can't comment on the quality of those presentations over the last 10 years. But we're certainly seeing a lot more transparency now, and we're embracing the findings
Right.
versus years ago where I have a sense that the board may not have had the opportunity to do so. They may have known or may not have known
Okay.
the detail.
I mean, that's what I
maybe they
wondered.
were given a document, but when you're given, I say this all the time, if you're given 5 pages, you'll read it, but if you're given 500, it may take a while. So,
Just when I noticed the red flags tonight, I mean, they're not huge red flags. I mean, we've been aware of them because of the forensic audit. But when I saw those tonight, I'm like, wouldn't a presentation of 3 or 4 years ago have made mention of these types of flags? And I don't recall hearing them in the public, so.
They were there. They were there, and the staff had recommendations. They were working on them, that we had flags. Every audit has flags.
I'm sorry, I don't recall them ever being presented in the public by the auditors before, but, so that's new, is what we're saying. Basically, that level of kind of the good, the bad, the ugly is just all out there now, which is better.
Susan, Bob had given us the audit reports from, I think, 2003 you started, or from a long time ago, all of the statements and warnings that we received to kind of consider going forward. And when I was reviewing this 2009 report, I looked at all of those from 2003, 4, 5, 7, and I can tell you the two that we've had now, 2008, 2009, are much more readable. They're clearer. They seem like they're more encompassing.
Okay.
So, yeah, they have always been presented. I think in 2000, these two most recent ones are very very comprehensible.
Okay, comprehensible. Yeah, comprehensible. Okay, that was just a side question. It was more about this notion of open space and the total debt of Radnor is a much bigger scope. And, if there's anything that the district and the township can do together to save us money, or transfer ownership of land. Maybe it doesn't make sense for the school district to own a field that mostly the township uses, and what's most efficient and most cost saving for the township of Radnor, whether it's district or township, is what I'm asking for.
Let's say the taxpayers.
The taxpayers is really what I'm asking for, and preserve what we can, because the one distinguishing feature that's going on here is that, as bad as the situation is at the school board, on top of everything else, they're constrained by the Act 1 law. So you were able to raise taxes 11% to try to meet the needs and try to structure, and still you're struggling. And the school district by law is constrained to stay at 2.9 this year. And that is projected to continue to be that bad. So it will impact us all the way around. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you,
I just
Susan.
want to address the open space. I'm glad you brought up the fact that this group is going to be looking at priorities for open space funding and our history of open space spending. And the Open Space Committee has recommended, and we are moving forward with, there's a group coming from the Comp Plan Implementation Committee and from our Planning Commission that they are working on updating our open space plan, which right now it dates back from 1991. And they're organizing a public process. There'll be public meetings for public input, and it'll delineate the priorities that we, as a community, at this point, at this juncture in history, the priorities that we want to see in our open space funding moving forward. I'm not sure that that group is including a history of open space funding. They probably will. So I would encourage those two groups to work together, but that process is already underway. And there will be an updated prioritization of our open space priorities.
Further public comment?
Good evening, Commissioner. Steve Pettick, resident of Different Township, but frequent visitor here to Radnor. I'm just here, John, to follow up on the preemption violation, the firearms in the parks. When I was here a couple months ago, you said you were going to have John look into it. So have you guys had a chance to discuss that and possibly amend that ordinance?
Well, what we did is we never passed the ordinance, we tabled it, and instead we passed a resolution.
No, that's the lost and stolen.
Right.
This is the prohibition on possession of firearms in the township parks.
Oh, yeah,
There was an issue raised.
Yes.
That you have on your books currently, a provision that prevents firearms being carried in public parks.
Right.
I haven't found anything that would prohibit the township from keeping that on the books. It's something that I had talked to Chief Ruddy, haven't had a chance to talk to AJ about it at this point. Board really hasn't asked me to do anything other than to look at that. I think your concern is that that's preempted also, right?
That's correct.
That's your opinion in any
Well,
event.
yes, and we've approached multiple townships, a group that I work with over the years, and every single one has removed it from their books upon further review.
Could you give me, I'd like to see some information from those other municipalities, because I looked at a lot of other municipal ordinances, and there's some rules and regulations. If you use our parks, here's the rules and regulations you have to follow.
Right, it seems to be a boilerplate thing. It's this E-Code 360 that a lot of townships use, and they create their, I'm not sure where the townships get these boilerplate ordinances and regulations.
What I've seen, they're not all boilerplate. They are, in some municipalities, and Radnor's is a little different, but there's comprehensive rules and regulations. You can't shoot bows and arrows, you can't carry guns or shoot guns, you can't do other things. There's a laundry list of things, and I haven't found, in researching the other issue that was in front of this board, anything that would prohibit that type of a restriction in a park that's owned by Radnor Township.
It's the 6120 statute.
Yeah.
You're regulating possession.
But it's never been addressed in this particular type of environment. It's a public park. It's not a blanket prohibition of carrying firearms. So if you have some information, I'll certainly look at it. But at this point,
We don't want to spend a lot of time on it.
I'm not going to spend
But the reality is, you have some good information,
I can
email it to
forward,
us.
yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
please do.
We approached Tradifferent, and Bill Lamb amended the ordinance within 3-4 weeks.
Yep.
So, all right, John, I guess your email's on the website. I can forward you some information.
My opinion is that he should forward information to someone on our board or
Right.
to the township
Send it to
manager,
me.
and they should make a
Okay.
decision about employing the solicitor, not, no
Okay.
offense to you, sir, but
Okay,
someone
no,
from
that's-
Radnor should decide
Right.
that this is how we want to use our resources, not someone from outside of Radnor.
Okay, no problem. So send some stuff to you then, John,
Yes,
and we'll go
please.
from there?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Sarah Pilling again from Garrett Hill. I have something I've been chewing on for more than a month now, and Barron gave me the minutes. And it's about your sewer rent. I believe I heard at your last meeting that because we had a wet summer of 2009, and the fact that some of us might be conserving water didn't come up, that your sewer rent take, I'm going to call it, the income from the sewer rent was down. So there was discussion of changing the rate because it was a fee, not a tax, so that you could charge us you could change the rate if we use less water. So I'm a little confused because there was a public hearing here several months ago because Aqua is proposing to increase their rate for us to buy the water that we're going to use, that you're then going to charge us a sewer rent. And this does not seem to match the fact that we're also being asked to use rain barrels and water our gardens and put in rain gardens. So we're drawing less water and we're not having it rush out into the land. And it looks to me like I'm in a bind because I'm trying to use less water because A, it's good for the environment because the truth is we're running out of water worldwide. I'm trying to use less water because I'm on a fixed income, believe it or not. I happen to be 73 years old, and my Social Security is not going up, so that my water bill is down, but it isn't going to matter that my water bill is going down because you're going to change the rate so that you get a certain amount of income, and I find this doesn't jibe.
Well, first of all, we decided that we weren't changing the rate. Secondly, we're not making money off the sewers.
Right.
This is what it costs to provide the service.
Well, I'm very well aware of that. I just
So-
want to point out there's sort
Oh,
of an
yeah, we're all,
inconsistency.
and tipping fees went up dramatically because Delaware County passed them on to
But
us.
here, I don't believe in complaining or bringing an issue forward to you without coming up with a practical suggestion. I know you call it a sewer rent. It's really a tax. And if you're going to raise the fees, I'd like to see you look at the legality of making it a tax, because then I can add it to my county tax, my township tax, and my school tax, and I can take it off my income tax. Because it looks to me like we're working a double thing. We want to conserve water because it's good for the environment, but if we conserve water, we're going to maybe raise the fee because we need the income. And I've really been chewing on this for a month, and so I brought my little water wheel that the water company sent me of all the ways I can use less water. So I just ask you to look at that because it just doesn't quite jibe. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Here comes Barron.
Yes, as John says, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne. 3 quick points. First off, thank you for addressing the zoning ordinance. I had a second procedural issue with it, but I'll refrain from any comments till I have a chance to read that decision and see what other comments I wanted to make. But speaking of procedural things, there was, at the zoning hearing board last meeting, last Thursday, and to give you a little background, Pembroke, Len Wayne properties are merging an R5 property and putting a parking lot there. And they, I believe, got approval for their plan at the February zoning hearing board meeting. Subsequent to that, Matt is the zoning officer, and in consultation, I believe, with the solicitor John Rice, looked at an additional zoning paragraph and realized that they weren't in compliance with that, and basically told the applicant, before you get any permits, you have to get that, get a variance or whatever relief you need from that. That was taken to the zoning hearing board last Thursday, and for whatever reason, the zoning hearing board solicitor says, you don't need to look at this, you don't need to deal with this. And I just don't understand how that process took place, given that the ruling was made that there was a zoning violation that they would need relief from. So as much as I don't want to sit here and keep giving you procedural things to look at, that's a fairly major one, and not an uncommon one where an applicant doesn't ask for all the relief they need and something's found out later. So if I would appreciate if that could be looked into.
We can have the staff look into that.
I mean, you know the answer now, John Rice?
I did not know they were back at the zoning hearing board. Was it last Thursday?
It was last
Yeah,
Thursday,
last
yes.
Thursday.
It was an issue that Matt and I consulted on probably 2 months ago. I mean, I vaguely remember what the issue was, but I didn't know they had gone back, so I don't know. I wasn't there.
Zoning hearing board says you don't have to be here for that.
They dismissed it. That's
Yeah.
what it says on our.
Well, if they dismissed it, they dismissed it.
Yeah.
It's their
Yeah.
ruling.
That's right, and
I
that's,
mean,
they're a
they-
semi-judicial body, and we don't have control.
Well,
over
no,
it.
actually, they didn't take a vote. They just didn't do anything on it. That was, I don't know how the minutes read. They didn't take a vote to allow the relief. They just, the opinion of the solicitor was they didn't need to do anything, so they didn't do anything.
Even though an application had been filed?
Yeah, I
And
don't know
they
if Matt
had-
wants to address that. I mean, and we don't need to address this now if you want to find out more facts
Yeah,
about it, but.
Seems reasonable to find out the information and present it to us.
I think Matt would probably, I mean, he was familiar with this and
Yeah.
had conversations with the landowner. I mean, we can talk to him tomorrow.
That's why our staff members there to carry the ball with the zoning hearing board and tell them why it's back to them.
Well, in a way that was done, I don't think they really heard, I don't think the solicitor heard the appropriate thing, and I think he was a little confused about why it was back, so that might be part of the reason. But the point is, something needs to be done, because they were told they were not in compliance, and they haven't gotten relief from that particular aspect.
Wow. They
Looks
make
like the zoning
application.
hearing board agreed with the argument their barrister made.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's not the appropriate procedure when the zoning hearing board, when the zoning officer has made a ruling. They have to do something on that.
They dismissed it.
They dismissed it. That's,
All
they
right,
did
well,
take it.
we can't
Yeah.
settle it
But
here.
well,
That's
okay,
not-
no,
that's
I
a-
didn't
that's a
mean
legal
to settle it
thing.
here.
It's a legal thing.
Last one, and this might go back to John Rice too. On the business tax settlement, which I believe the settlement was in the amount of $300,000, if I heard that correctly?
Yes.
What was the outstanding debt that was settled for that amount? Is that?
That's,
We can't disclose that.
yeah, there's felony penalties, there's misdemeanor penalties, there's under the taxpayer bill of there's no other information we can disclose on that, Barron.
Not even forgetting the penalties itself, not even the amount of tax that was owed originally?
I wouldn't disclose that, no, not at this time.
So we really can't, just, we don't know if it was $1 million, from a taxpayer perspective. we
It
don't know if
wasn't $1 million, it was not $1 million.
Okay.
It was a settlement that was recommended by the Township's council, and the board discussed it in an executive session, and trying to at least put this on the record so these things get approved in the normal course of business. That's about as far as we can go at this point, and that's as far as we're going to go.
When I appreciate it being, brought before the board, I was just kind of curious what
Yeah,
kind of a deal we cut.
In fact, we had a great debate over just that thing. Because when you bring it out and we say 300 and it opens
John, I
up.
would
But there's
suggest,
no-
I would suggest you defer to John Rice.
Yeah, and we're gonna have, there's gonna be a policy, a more specific policy on this that we will work out with the board over the next couple months on these types of cases.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. It wasn't my intent to open that as a can of worms. I was just curious as to what we had to give up in terms of that settlement. Thanks.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
We adjourn.
Hasta la vista.